All right. Good morning, Doug. So let's talk about immigration. We have the end of Title 42, which was a COVID era policy that somehow allowed them to deport people more easily or to disallow them access to the U.S. And so kind of like the gloves are off, and apparently people coming in much greater numbers. And then we had a few years ago with the stuff that was going on in Syria. There were a lot of migrants in Europe. That seemed to be a really big deal for a while, and at least it faded from the headlines. What do you think are we just seeing a temporary situation? I mean, we don't see people leaving a conflict zone here that are coming into the US, but what are the dynamics that might make this stop or slow down? Because the numbers that are crossing the border are pretty massive at this point.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what the numbers are, but probably getting a couple of million feet people walking across the Rio Grande every year. I mean,
Yep.
Who knows what the number is, but it sounds like it's a couple of million people. This all comes down to property rights. You cannot have a civilization of any type unless you have property rights. So the question is, if across the Rio Grande or wherever they're coming in, and that's where they're mainly coming in, whose property are they walking across? And that person's property rights are being violated. And that person, whoever it is, or if the US government or the state government owns that property, they should defend that property as well. Although I'm of the opinion that all property should be privately owned. All property, including the national parks, should be privately owned. And if something is privately owned, then the owner of that property should have the right to defend his property by whatever means necessary. In a lot of parts of the country, there are signs on people's property that say, if you're found here at night, you'll be found here in the morning. And I think that's entirely reasonable. You warn people, stay out, you're not welcome here. Like they say in bars, you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. And so what makes people think that these people have a right to violate our property rights and set foot where they're not welcome, and be encouraged? Because everybody knows that if you get across the border, then you'll be fed and you'll be housed and you'll probably get a cell phone.
Yep.
And, then what happens?
They set a court date for 2027. That's what happens.
Yeah. So in the meanwhile, since these people don't have papers and can't get a job because, with the increasing digitalization of the US, you have to show your papers to an employer in most cases in order to get a job. So what are these people supposed to do? They've walked across the border. They're all economic migrants. It's not like they're being prosecuted. They're just poor people, understandably.
Yep.
They want to go to a place where it's rich. I understand that. I mean, I'd want to do it if I was one of them too.
Yep.
But it's not our problem. If they've got problems in Guatemala or Haiti or wherever it is, well, we're sorry you got a problem, but we're not going to solve it for you. And you should go home and solve it for yourself. And we're not going to put you up just because you managed to walk across the river and now you're our problem. This is insane. It's actually insane.
Yeah. And what the other thing is very interesting about it, I was just looking at some of the statistics, Doug, and just, there's the numbers that are apprehended and then let go. But in the apparently in the first quarter, is it the first quarter? Sorry, the first half. Anyway, there were basically 530,000 what they call gotaways. So that's people, that's migrants who they see cross the border, but they did not surrender to border control or it's customs and border control, nor were they apprehended. So that's the number that they counted that got over that they did not apprehend. in the last year.
So how are those people going to support themselves? And where are they going to rest their heads at night? And how are they going to? This is really a mystery to me, apart from the fact that many of them that are not gotaways are being shipped to various states and cities around the country. Besides, well, look, it's a bigger problem. There were 200,000 Somalis that were imported to the US. Nothing against Somalis, but wait a minute. Who actually paid for all that airfare from Somalia to here? These are mostly penniless people. Who put them up? I mean, what's going on here? Because normally, if a European wants to immigrate to the US, well, take my wife, who's a South African. We had to spend thousands of dollars to get her papers in order so she could immigrate to the US. Maybe she should have just walked across the border on the Rio Grande. I could have saved thousands of dollars and a lot of aggravation. So why is it that these people get to come to the US and do whatever they do, wherever they do it? Who the hell knows? Nobody knows, really. And people that want to, go through the game, play the game, have to pay thousands of dollars and maybe not get a visa then.
Yeah, I mean, the big question I've always had is like, what is the underlying motivation behind allowing the borders to be like this, allowing, allowing it to happen? So like, what's the rationale? And of course, the argument we get from, there's two arguments you get from politicians is one is that, we're trying to allow, a willing worker to connect with a willing employer to do jobs that Americans are unwilling to do. That's one argument. And the Homeland Security, the guy in charge of it, Mayorkas, the other day was talking about how, it'd be wrong that there's a person with a job and a person who wants a job, you should be able to make that happen. So they use that argument, and then they use the moral argument again about how, people, human rights, and that, these people are, good people who just, trying to get a better life, and, they have a right to come in. Those are the two arguments they use for it. So there's that always in my head is about what is actually the motivation behind it. And there are a lot of theories that I've heard, but the other part is what you mentioned with the Somalis is who is financing it? Because it is extremely expensive to move these people across the world as they are. And I mean, there's the people coming from the border, but as you mentioned with those Somalis, that was a totally different route. As they were refugees, flown in or something. They didn't come across the border. They were brought here by plane. And so there must be some big financing operation, I guess is what I'm getting at, all around all this to make it all happen, to facilitate it.
Yeah, there are billions, and it is billions of poor people around the world that would love to come to the US, where we have infrastructure that works, where we have a court system that more or less works, where it's just a much better thing than it is to be in the US than a third world country. So are we supposed to fly them all here, or how's that supposed to work?
I don't know, but let me tell you about the middle school that I went to when I was growing up. My sister-in-law is a teacher there, and this is in the Midwest. It's right on, in an area that straddles the Mississippi River. And she told me the other day that they had in my old middle school, now there are 32 languages spoken there, 32 languages. And most of them, and then the state requires them that they have to have a translator once they get students above a certain, number. And so they have multiple, language people that they brought in just specifically. They have an Arabic, a couple they brought in from Jordan who lives here, who basically, for the students who speak Arabic. And, and I drove through the projects here. There are a bunch of not saying I like all kids. So there's a bunch of Muslim kids out there, African Muslim kids out playing, in the areas where actually I used to play. And that was just not, this is the middle of nowhere. So it's very strange that now this middle school I had, we had blacks, we had whites, and we had Mexicans, not Hispanics or Latinos, just Mexicans when I was growing up. and now 33 unique languages, and they're adding a new one, new translator next year for a language called Chin, which is apparently as a language spoken in Myanmar. Why they're here, I don't know.
This is really quite amazing. You know, it was one thing when during the 19th century, when the Irish, Italians, and Eastern Europeans landed in New York, mainly, most of them just about penniless, I guess, but they didn't get any support from anybody, but perhaps friends that were already here, and they had to make their way, and they had to learn English, and that's the way it was. It was their problem. But now you come from all kinds of places that are totally, the culture is totally different. Everything is totally different. And they're subsidized by the US government. This is a huge change. So in a way, I'm for open borders. Anybody should be able to go anywhere he wants.
Yep.
That's what I believe. But it's all about property rights. And if you come to a place and you don't have any property, then you better be able to maintain yourself in the Holiday Inn and buy food at the Howard Johnson's on your own. If you don't, and become a criminal and start stealing, well, then you have to be punished or at least sent back to where you came from.
Yeah. But the rule of law seems to have completely broken down, though. Is that, I mean, they aren't enforcing the laws, any of the laws, whether it be defense of property rights or illegal border crossings or anything related to this, frankly, even theft, when it doesn't serve the interests of somebody. And I don't know who that somebody is even, but it doesn't seem like the interests of the people who are from America.
It's creating chaos. So where do these people sleep? I mean, they get a tent someplace, I guess, after they leave the government camps. And where do they sleep? On sidewalks? But wait a minute. This is an argument for sidewalks being privately owned by the merchant that has a store there instead of government owned, where it's ruining the it's all about property rights.
One of our file members who now lives in Uruguay is from New York, and he shared an article the other day that said that in the local school they were housing in the Bronx. They were housing migrants in the gymnasium of the local school.
Well, those people have to stay someplace, and they can't afford houses, and they don't. This is a real problem.
Yeah, and you got to wonder when people are gonna. It's those political stunts where like DeSantis, sent the people to Martha's Vineyard was great for it was a PR stunt, but it was a really effective one. They send migrants to the VP's house, but you got to wonder as these people start to show if they're in large numbers showing up in people's communities, taking over schools because there really is no place to put them. At what point it becomes the people just reject it.
Well, not only that, but the government is going to make it harder and harder for these people to get work to support themselves. So they will have to be supported.
Right. Well, that leads to this E-Verify thing. The Republicans are pushing. E-Verify is a system that some states use apparently, which basically checks whether or not somebody can legally work in the U.S. And the idea is that it keeps illegal immigrants from taking jobs from Americans. But the Republicans are trying to push that through a nationwide mandatory E-Verify system for all employees, private, public, whatever. And I guess theoretically under that system, it'd make it impossible for those people to work, but it also allowed the government to be able to determine social credit score based or whatever, whether or not anybody could work.
Yeah, and there's no reason why the mass migration is going to stop anytime soon.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Millions and millions more of these people that need to be housed and fed and clothed and educated. And of course, if something goes wrong with their bodies and they present themselves at an emergency room, well, what are you going to do? Well, I guess you repair them, but that's expensive too.
Especially in our medical system, it's incredibly expensive. What the thing that I saw was that just, I guess, evidence that the government is anticipating this only to grow is that I made an article from about 10 days ago, and I'll put it in the description of the video. It says the U.S. announced plans to open new migrant processing centers in Colombia and Guatemala as part of efforts to reduce undocumented immigration. So it's like, they're trying to smooth out the process, I guess, of arrivals by actually putting facilities in these foreign countries.
Yeah, to document them, but they're still not going to have any assets or language skills or abilities to support themselves when they get here. So now they have a document that has been pre-approved in one of these countries. They come to the border, and now what do?
I think they get processed and moved out. That's what they seem to. It does seem like they're developing a logistics chain that basically is going to distribute these people all over the country. I mean, I think that's what they're doing. They've been doing that already, but I think that they're just, trying to work out the bottlenecks by pushing these processing centers down to Colombia and Guatemala, and they'll give them there. Maybe they get their Obama phone in Guatemala instead of having to wait till they get to the US to get it. I don't know.
Well, at some point, I mean, these people go through Mexico and they wind up at the border. I mean, it's very much like could happen in Europe during the next immigration crisis from the Middle East and from Africa. You just push down the fence and wander in. Now, what are they going to do about it? I mean, how do you stop overwhelming masses of humanity? It's not like they're foreign soldiers. I mean, you can't really shoot them. You can't really stop them because it's a human wave tactic at some point. It's very interesting.
Yeah, it seems like it's a really effective way to undermine everything within the United States, though, because you just overwhelm it with people that, yeah, I mean, the systems can't support it. The law won't defend anything. I mean, it's just like it does corrupt everything. Everything will fall apart under the burden of it.
Well, that's right. And I was talking about property rights, of course, but in the US, you really can't defend your own property either. Somebody invades your property, and what are you going to do about it?
In fact, I was talking with someone in Illinois, who said that under the new laws that the criminal code that they changed that went into effect in January, it is said that if somebody, a vagrant sets up on your front porch, you call the police will not remove them. So they don't, so it's not a violation. It's not something that the police will get involved with. So then you have to get involved with it. Of course, anything you might do, I'm sure would be considered illegal.
Well, that's right. You're looking for a lawsuit, or perhaps you're going to be arrested on the spot because you're part of an altercation, as they
exactly. Yeah, assault.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is actually how you destroy society and a civilization. And it seems like the momentum is still picking up.
Yeah, did you see that case? Just last thing on this, it doesn't relate to immigration, but it does to the law and order, and the subway incident that happened with a former Marine who restrained a multiple felon guy, who was being very aggressive on the subway and ended up killing him. Did you see that?
Yeah, that is truly amazing. Here's a guy who did something that was necessary and risky and actually heroic to protect the other passengers on the train, and he's being prosecuted.
Yep. I'm surprised they didn't charge. They only charged him with manslaughter. I was surprised they didn't go after him for even greater charges, honestly, the way they've been.
Well, of course, and make it into a hate crime because it was a white guy and a black guy.
Yep, exactly. And so this is the fundamental thing that started worrying me most about what was happening in the U.S. That we started to see this indications of this very clearly during the BLM, mostly peaceful protests, or anyone who was defending themselves, they had the book thrown at them, and anybody who burned things down were out on, without bail.
And basically, all the BLM and Antifa people seem to have gotten away with it scot-free. And the people that ran BLM got multi-million-dollar houses, and apparently they were able to skate with that too.
Yeah. So I've seen no repercussions from any of that. It's amazing. It's amazing.
I know it's bizarro world, and it's not getting better. It's getting worse. So at what point are the remaining majority of normal middle-class people who want to live a quiet, peaceable life in a more or less ethical way, when are they going to revolt against this? Or are they? Maybe too many of them are taking Prozac and 100 other psychotropic things, calming them down that they never will. I don't know.
If they do, I mean, the things like the case, I wish I could remember the guy's name in New York, the Marine. That's
Penny.
The idea with that is it discourages normal, good people from doing anything. It encourages you to just to turn a blind eye to it, to you witness an assault, just don't get involved, and then, but you got to imagine that there are some people that the only response to that, most people will be cowed into nothing. And then if there is anyone who does respond to it, they'll do it as much more of a vigilante type thing where their identity wouldn't be known, they wouldn't. So I don't know, it could encourage a lot of violence. It could encourage exactly what I think they're trying to do, which is they're trying to create this idea of this white supremacy being the most dangerous thing in America, by having competent people who are tired of it take action.
Yeah, the people who are in control of the apparatus of the state, certainly on a national level, but also on a state and city and local level, they're actively encouraging race hatred and irresponsibility and violence. It's an old saying, hey, the lunatics are in control of the asylum, but this is actually the case today.
It really is. Yeah, and they're turning everything into like a version of Gotham, where you do have an insane person like the Joker in charge of everything.
That's right. Well, as usual, art is predictive of what goes on in a broader society. So
yeah. We just need the Batman and the Punisher to help out.
Trouble is that the Batman stories were way too optimistic.
That's true.
First of all, because you have a Batman, and secondly, because he kind of wins in the end. But that's not the way it's working today. There's no Batman, and when somebody wants to be one, he's slapped down. And
true, but there are a lot of these. There are a lot of these global war on terror military guys, and you just got to wonder. A lot of them were done with their service before Biden came into office anyway. A lot of them were flushed out through vaccine, not willing to take it. I mean, you got to wonder at what point those guys, there are a lot of good, people who have a very idealistic view of what America is, and they see what's happening and it worries them. And they believe that they can and should defend it. Honestly, I don't know. There's bred into them, I think.
Yeah. Well, the question is, when is the pot going to boil over? But you're in the U.S. now, and all I can say is, welcome back to Uruguay in a couple of days, where these are only academic problems that you see on television as opposed to upfront and personal.
I'm looking forward to it. Let me tell you. All right. Well, we'll leave it there for today, Doug, and we'll be back with questions from our file members. If you want to know more about our file, click on the link in the description below. It's our private member group, and we'll be back with, as I said, questions on Friday. So thanks, Doug.